good afternoon to you guys. Aradhya Gupta here from Internal Combustion. And today in this podcast, I'd like to make you meet one of the greatest classic car restorers I have met. Although I haven't met too many of them, but still, I happen to have a very funny but a very beautiful initial interaction with him. I still remember both of us meeting at a car meet one of these recent evenings, wherein everybody was driving in these modern cars. I was in my car, and everybody was coming in, say, Mustangs, BMs, Mercs, and Toyotas, and so on and so forth. And suddenly I see this young gentleman driving in with a BMW, but not just any BMW. He drives in with an E30, if I'm not wrong, and another BMW, a white colored BMW, which I'm not sure about the series, but again, it was a 5 series, and it was one of the classic 5 series, not the modern day ones. So he was personally driving the E30, and I still remember when he just drove past me. I knocked on his window and I told him that, boss, finally I get to see a real car enthusiast, and finally I get to see a real car. Considering most of the modern day cars today, no offense, they're beautiful cars, but they have a lot of computers and a lot of tech happening in the cars, wherein the connection between man and the machine is not as much as it used to be. Well, this gentleman seems to be one of the very fine examples of a beautiful connection between man and the machine. Introducing Vaibhav. Meet Vaibhav, a name synonymous with a passion that transcends time. At the heart of his world lies a profound connection with classic cars. But Vaibhav isn't just a collector, he's a craftsman, a restorer, and a purveyor of automotive history. Through his business, Phoenix Garages, Vaibhav breathes new life into automotive legends from the past. He takes these aging beauties once forgotten by many and meticulously restores them to their former glory. It's it's not just about turning wrenches and fine tuning engines, it's about revving the spirit of these iconic vehicles. Each car tells a story, and Vaibhav is the storyteller, ensuring that the echoes of the history resonates with future generations. Done. So let's hear your story. What made you get into classic cars? Because I believe that's where your heart is actually.
Classic cars, cars have always been a passion. Since I was growing up, I was always into automobiles. It was never that it was just classic cars, because when we were growing up, they were cars. Now they've become classic cars because we've grown up quite a bit. And
Actually, you're right. Those are what cars are actually.
those are what cars are. For me, like growing up, the 124 Mercedes was quite a prominent when Mercedes come into India. So that was one of the cars. But BMWs always fascinated me. I still remember as a kid, my parents still live in Green Park. So my bus stop used to be there on the main road, if you've seen Green Park Market. And there used to be this house that had an E30 convertible back in the day. I'm saying this 20 plus years back.
Okay.
And I remember looking at it every morning and wondering, how beautiful this is, because you'd never see an E30. Where would you see an older BMW, especially with those, the dual headlamps in the front?
Correct.
So it's always been a fascination that and being lucky enough to acquire some of them now is a different thing altogether. It's a tough job to keep these cars up and running, but it's also very rewarding. So going back on what you'd asked me, that how this started. I think this was always most guys or most boys that I know of are always passionate about an automobile. It's something that always is piquing their interest. So it was a very natural progression, And it all started with my first project car, which was the E46 Coupe back in 2018.
Okay.
So my brother had just come back from uni, and we were looking for a project car for him. So the deal was that he wanted to buy a car there. And I said, boss, he's looking at 500, 800 horsepower Supras. And I said, nothing doing, because he's, 18 years old and he's looking at these Supras. I'm like, you come back, I'll get you a nice project car here. So that's how we ended up we're looking for an E46, because that's one of the most iconic BMWs ever. And that was my personal favorite when I was growing up.
E46 is the one, the white one.
E46 is this one. That's exactly my car. Yeah.
Got it.
So it's the 3 Series from the early 2000s. So we were looking for a clean car. We knew a gentleman who used to sell us some cars and buy some of our older cars as well. So he had a very clean example, but he wasn't willing to part with it. So he said, "I'll find you something better," and he ended up finding us a coupe. Okay. So that was the first project I started work on, and I got hooked onto it since, man.
But then I'm sure. So 2018 is, you're saying, when it started. Your classic car journey started, but before that, I'm sure you, as you mentioned, like every boy, you were fond of cars. Was there a certain type of cars that you were earlier fond of, and then you evolved into something, something about classic cars that fascinated you?
The first, it's more about the BMW brand, because the first premium car that I bought for myself, saved up for a couple of years, and bought for myself, was a BMW X1, which is not a very particularly sporty car, but because of that N47 diesel engine, and we tuned it and we lowered the car, it was quite nice. And especially going from, let's say, a 120 horsepower car, which most of us have driven when we were much younger, all the way up till 220 tuned car, was quite an upgrade. And the way the car handled, just the dynamics, just the feedback, just made me a fan of the brand as such. Because not everyone can afford a Porsche 911. Especially at that age, So this would give you the dynamics, the feel of, a very nice, well-planted car at a fraction of the price of what you would, go and spend. And my first car ever was actually a Maruti Suzuki Swift. It was a diesel Swift. And I remember back in 2009-10, modding it, getting nice Koni wheels on it, getting nice kick-ass sound system, because back in the day it used to be all about the sound system
and that stuff. Thing, when it was launched, I still remember that was one of the best handlers around.
Yeah, what a beautiful car. I still remember I got these BF Goodrich tires from BK in Lajpat Nagar. I'm saying what Michelin's are today, right? The Pilot Sports. Those BF Goodrich tires were like that back in the day. 100, 120, you took a left turn, a right turn, you wouldn't even hear the tires. Wow. And those cars are bloody light. So, they would roll all the way. And that set of tires, that's the first time I learned. I was probably 17, 18 years old. That tires make all the difference in how the car drives. People spend on wraps, this, that, wheels and all of that. I feel the best thing that you need to, what you need to spend on the most is the tires you get in your car. Because that will completely redefine your drive and how the car handles.
Well, I think that also completely depends, because what happens is so many bunch of guys who are into cars, but they don't, they just can't, how should I put it? They just can't connect to the G-forces. Like people like you, me, and many other people, they just connect with the G-force. They don't care what color the car is and what colored wrap is it. What really matters is, sabse pehle, if you want to go in for an upgrade, let's go in for a coilover setup.
Yeah, see, I feel as an enthusiast, it's all about how the car makes you feel, right? And then that's how you change the car about. Like you said, coilovers. So essentially, we know people who will go for a stage 1 upgrade, stage 2 upgrade, talk about all these nonsense, but they'll never think of upgrading the brakes or the coilovers. Correct. Which is the first thing. The first thing you do as soon as you get a fast car, or relatively fast, or any car, you get a nice set of tires, you get good suspension, you get good brakes, and then you see what's the best you can pull out of that. If you're into racing, correct, or if you're into tracking the car, then you see the difference within the car. And then you go about, getting power mods and all these other things, which people look for initially here in our country. Mostly younger enthusiasts, they'll want to go for the stage 1, stage 2 upgrade, and then probably think later, oh, the car's not handling well, now we need to get coilovers.
On the other hand, I feel it's the complete opposite. For example, even if you buy a Swift, and with everything stock, bone stock, and you're taking a turn and it starts squealing at 80, probably if you put coilovers, it will start squealing at 120.
No, definitely.
You can take a turn faster. You can do a lot of other things just at a much faster pace with an accurate handling, with all the existing same tune, factory tune, nothing doing.
I completely agree. I think the suspension makes all of a difference. And this is something I've seen myself, seen the difference in cars. And obviously, a lot of very learned people who've been into motorsports have also. This is not like, this been inculcated over a period of time that this is how you need to go about doing a car up.
True.
So I think people need to have the right people who are advising them. I feel a lot of tuners, a lot of times they'll just suggest a tune and this and that because it's an easy 1 hour, 2 hours, you have the guy out of the shop and it's a good 30, 40, 50K just made very easily.
Correct.
So I feel that because the coilovers cost a lot more, you need to convince the customer quite a bit. I think most tuners don't even try. But the real ones, that some of the people that worked on my cars, they'll be very upfront and tell you, man, that this is what you need. And without this, it's going to feel like shit. Like, I remember with the E30 also, Phil did my car and he was very particular about the suspension setup. Like, I was getting some parts in India that were, maybe someone had imported them but not using them. And I was like, should I buy this? Isn't getting a good deal on it. He's like, nothing doing, man. We're going to import everything. We're going to do it properly, how it's supposed to be. And we're going to get the best of the parts. And now I see the difference in the drive of my car. Yeah. It's been about 1.5 years that I've had my car. And every time I drive it, it is brilliant, man. You feel like the tire moving by, let's say, even 2 inches. That's how direct the drive is. And it's all because of suspension. And the suspension's not soft at all. Neither is it too hard. It's just right, Even with our shitty roads, it's just right. It's quite a bit lower. Right.
Can you share some interesting discoveries that you would have made while restoring classic cars that you have?
Interesting discoveries. See, they're a pain to restore, man. Let me just tell you that. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I was not as patient of a person during my first car or my second car as I have become now. I never thought that I'll get into the business of classic cars, but it's just something that came to me so naturally that it doesn't feel like work. See, some of the things are you have to do things right. A lot of times people in Delhi or people up north, I don't know a lot of people doing restorations in the south, I don't know them personally, and I'm fairly new in this line. But people up north, a lot of times they will want to cut corners. I feel something that one needs to do is do a proper ground up restoration properly, like take the car back to bare metal, rebuild it from that. If there's an older engine, if it's still running, you check the compression, get it rebuilt properly from a proper professional, that's how it needs to be. Get the right parts imported, don't skimp on spending on parts on a car, because a lot of times, a lot of collectors that I know of, not the senior collectors from the HMC and stuff, but a lot of other people who happen to have these cars over the years, have not really done them up the right way. And there's major rust, and on rust only they put filler, body filler, and just painted the cars again. So like recently I went a couple of months back, I won't take any names, but I went to see classic Chevy. If I tell you what car it is, then most people will get to know. So this is.
I remember you were telling me that you're supposed to.
I was very keen on it, man. As soon as I got there, I was a looker, man. And a classic red color, 4-door big ass Chevy from the late 60s, early 70s. And check the car out, man. Open up the carpet and everything. Completely rusted inside. And I asked him, who did the restoration, who did the paint job? Oh, we have someone right here on the roadside who did. And the gentleman wanted an arm and a leg for the car. So I said, boss, we need to work something out, because a ground up restoration for one of these cars is somewhere in the double digits, higher double digits. Like I'd say anywhere between 15 to 20 lakh rupees is what a restoration like that would cost. And the gentleman wanted a similar amount for the car. I said, the paperwork wasn't updated, needed in the interior, quite a bit was missing in the interior as well. So it just doesn't add up. People want the value that international values are going for the car, but they don't want to spec it out or like restore them how people do them up internationally. I feel India now is doing really well in on the international scene, because people like Mr. Goenka, a lot of other senior restorers here, people like Mr. Jatti, are doing up the cars really well.
Okay.
So now I can say that in the past couple of decades, we're with the international standards. Like our cars do stand up at Pebble Beach and win awards as well. So that's something that we've seen a change. but it needs to be inculcated in a lot more people, I feel.
So, similarly, like what you said, in case of your cars, like if I am to talk about, I mean, I've only seen 2 or 3 of your cars, one Toyota and 2 BMs, the white one and the red one.
Right.
So, in case of those cars, how was it for you? Were there any surprises after you bought those cars that you came across?
Okay, so I'll tell you. I'll start with the E30 because that was my first ground up restoration. I had someone who was very knowledgeable about the cars, and up north, he's the only person who I know who had had a similar car for about 2.5 decades.
Okay.
So I felt that he was the person to go to about the car, since he spent a lot of time breaking and fixing his own car.
Right.
It took about 2 years to get the car to where it was before I could send it for paint to Ricky. But the electrical wiring was gone. A lot of malpractices that happen in India is people don't get the right mechanics to work on the cars. They don't spend on parts. Instead of a coolant bottle, it was like a Coke bottle that was put in that place. So, just funny shit that you'll be like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Yeah. And just absurd stuff. Like, they've spent inside, there is this screen that they put for reversing the car. Bloody 3 Series from the 80s. How can you not reverse that car? Why do you need a reverse monitor? And some, crazy electrical laser light they put in the back. Instead of spending all this nonsense, why don't you spend on actually keeping up the car? So it was quite a task, the first car, because we were doing it through COVID. We ordered parts twice, and twice our orders got cancelled midway because of something or the other regulations in that country. So it took us a good 1 year to actually just get the parts through to India. Because we'd place an order, sometimes something wasn't available, sometimes something wasn't available. Because the E30 particularly they stopped making it about 30 years back, 25, 30 years back. So it's not like every person will stock parts for it. And if there is a person who's listed a couple of parts, they're in back order. So a lot of times what happens is they'll take your order and then they'll start looking, okay, this is in back order, we need to produce this, or we need to source it from somewhere else. So it took quite some time. And I'm very anal when it comes to my cars, that they have to be just right, because you can't have them 100% going back to how the factory cars was, because you need to understand they're older cars.
Yeah.
These cars have a soul, they have a life of their own, so they are going to be with their own sort of little bit issues that are going to come. But you need to do them up as original as possible. Because there are such few examples in India that I feel you owe it to the cars to do them up right, man. You can't bastardize these cars, you can't put different engines and, just like big ass wheels and all of that. They have to be done right because there are so few examples in India, I feel. And going to the Toyota was again a ground up restoration. The car was totally screwed up. The gentleman had left the car outside for about 3-4 years. Before that also, what they'd done was they'd put on some fuck all body kit which was like all fiber, and the car looked like an Alpha from the front, and the rear had some side grills like a Mustang or something like that. So it's really screwed up. So getting it back to factory shape, fabricating the bumper. We fabricated the bumper in-house, by the way, because that's a JDM spec car. So there are not a lot of examples around the world. Like now people are importing it into the US and stuff.
But you weren't able to get those parts from Japan?
No, I wasn't able because there's so few cars. Okay. The cars are only a handful number.
Which one was it? Toyota?
It's a Toyota Truno Sprinter GT Apex Edition. Okay. So this comes with a 4AGE silver top, which is one of the legendary 4-cylinder engines.
Right.
And this revs up to 8,500 RPM, makes about 170 horses, and it comes with 4 ITBs. So individual throttle bodies. So it sounds like a mad engine. If you've heard any of those rally cars here that come with those individual throttle bodies, it's a proper naturally aspirated engine. You can hear the induction noises going crazy. So just doing justice to a car like that and rebuilding it properly was quite a task. Arranging parts. And it took us, 6 to 8 months to actually get the car to where it is now.
So, as I earlier mentioned about, I didn't mention, actually, we were talking about a bunch of different kinds of guys who are, enthusiastic about cars. And some people are fond of classic cars like yours, and some people are fond of, car pewters, what we call them today. So what we are talking right now, I'm sure a gazillion people, God willing, a gazillion people watch this, but they would be thinking, yeah, what is it about classic cars that this man is explaining that we are not able to understand? So, what would you like to put across to those people who just cannot understand the oomph and the sort of sexiness about these machines?
See, I'll tell you what. They're not cookie cutter cars like we get now.
Huh.
And they're so few that they have their own character and soul. Something what modern cars lack nowadays. I really feel that. Because the problem with modern cars is you go buy a car, I say XYZ, you go buy, let's say most common cars are the Polos amongst enthusiasts. You go buy a Polo. If the third person has a Polo, today you invest into, let's say, a W124 or let's say an entry level E36. At least you have something that's different and you can build it up how you would want. And it has a character of its own. These cars, I feel, lack a lot of character. I'm not saying they're not great cars. I myself have a Polo 1 liter TSI, so I'm not hating on them, on the community as such. I'm just saying that more and more people up north, younger people, need to understand how rewarding it is to have a classic car. Because when they work really well. And they're not fairly unreliable. Don't get me wrong. They're not unreliable at all. The modern classics that I have, most of the modern classics that I have, are fairly reliable. You could do a bloody 500-kilometer road trip and they won't break down on you. Provided they're done up right and you spend the money that needs to be spent on the parts.
So for me also, the journey, why I ended up buying a Jeep Wrangler. Before this, I used to drive an Endeavour 3.2, which is a
lovely
fairly,
car. It's one of my personal favorites.
It's a tank, in my opinion.
Very well built car, very planted on the highway, drives like a car that's worth 3 times of what it was worth, brand new. And if people who have driven that and still end up buying the Fortuner, that I don't know what to say about them, because the Endeavour is a brilliant bloody car, man. It was such a setback that Ford had to shut doors in India.
Absolutely, yes. So, the good part was about that car, the brilliant part was that, so much of weight, 2.5 tons approximately, and so much happening, such a heavy engine, 3.2 liter 5-cylinder engine. The great part is that you don't feel a thing inside the car.
Very great NVH levels, by the way.
NVH levels
very
also.
Low,
and even in terms of stability, you brake the car, it stops pretty comfortably.
Not a lot of nose diving in the car. And the overall dynamics of the car were also very sedan-like. You won't say it doesn't feel like an SUV because the seating position is very prominent. It feels like you're driving a big-ass truck. But it doesn't feel very heavy. It doesn't feel like it's a very dated car. The problem with the difference between the Endeavour and the Fortuner is the Fortuner feels like driving a pickup truck from the 90s. Whereas this feels like an actual modern SUV.
I mean, this is a true example of Ford. But so in continuation to what I was saying, the bad part about that is that, again, you don't feel a thing. So
see,
I just don't feel a thing. So which is why, like, even although the Wrangler has the most modern engine, a Fiat 2-liter multi-air engine and an automatic gearbox, but the fact that it does not have independent front suspension, it has got old school solid axles up front and at the back, and it's got a very old school steering box. I think it's a steering box setup. It's damn direct, and you need to make an effort to keep it on road. Sometimes you need to make an effort to turn and handle that car. When you're off-roading, you really feel every turn of the steering, every punch on the accelerator. You're clearly able to feel it, and that's something very similar. I mean, I can clearly relate to you when you would be driving these kind of cars. Essentially, that's what we want to be able to feel, that there is something which is rolling on the road. You can feel a little bit of the vibration. You can hear the pistons banging up and down. And I mean, I think I'm just running out of words. That's a very special feeling which is just missing in cars today.
Like I was saying earlier, these cars have a character,
Absolutely.
and they have a personality of their own. Now, the Wrangler, it's a different personality. It's not the most comfortable car. It's not the most luxurious car that you can buy for that money. Neither is the most powerful. But you still bought one.
Exactly.
Because it's an icon. It is an icon.
It is.
And it's the last of a dying breed.
Yeah.
It's probably the last generation of the Wrangler that feels like this.
Exactly.
Probably from the next one, it's going to be like how the Bronco is now.
Yeah.
So
I hope Jeep does do that.
And another thing is, if you do plan on holding on to these, mark my words, these are definitely going to go up in value because everybody is going to miss the analog bits in these cars.
Oh yeah.